For this presentation, we looked at a randomized controlled trial that looked at using mobilization with movement during external rotation for individuals recovering from a rotator cuff injury. And the article prefaced by stating that patients that have undergone rotator cuff repair, it's crucial for them to employ exercises that improve the infraspinatus muscle activation and limit excessive anterior translation of the humeral head. Posterior glenohumeral glide mobilization during external rotation strengthening exercises can limit the anterior movement of the humeral head, which is why they chose to look at using mobilization. And this study sought to compare the external rotation strength and muscle activation of shoulder external rotation between strengthening performed at 0 degrees and 90 degrees of shoulder abduction, both with and without mobilization. The study included 40 patients who had undergone rotator cuff repair, and they were then placed into either a control, which was the non-mobilization group, or a test group where they employed mobilization. And the mobilization group applied posterior glenohumeral mobilization during the external rotation strengthening at both 0 and 90 degree of shoulder abduction, and the group without mobilization performed external rotation strengthening at the same angles, but without the posterior glenohumeral mobilization. This study used surface electromyography to record muscle activation in the infraspinatus, middle deltoid, and posterior deltoid, and they used fixed base isometric dynamometry for shoulder external rotation strength. Group and shoulder abduction angles differed between the individuals, but they were analyzed and accounted for during testing. Post-intervention testing revealed that external rotation muscle strength and infraspinatus muscle activity were significantly higher in the group with mobilization than the group without. And this was true for both 0 degrees and 90 degrees, but the ratio was significantly higher during 90 degrees of abduction. The results suggest that posterior glenohumeral mobilization could be a useful strategy for immediate strength of shoulder external rotation and increased infraspinatus activity in patients who underwent an arthroscopic repair to the rotator cuffs.
The main takeaway that I saw from this article was that when you're doing external rotational exercises with posterior mobilization, it can help strengthen the infraspinatus and stabilize the shoulder after rotator cuff repair. It also makes rehab exercises more effective and can reduce unnecessary muscle use. A big strength that I saw was that it is a randomized control trial, so that makes the results more reliable. It also used objective measures like EMG and strength tests, which make the data pretty solid. On the downside, the study only looked at short-term effects, so we don't know if the improvements last beyond what they researched. The sample size was pretty small as well, around 40 people, so we have to be careful when we're applying this information to wider populations.
One of the strengths of the study that I saw is all participants underwent an arthroscopic repair for a full thickness rotator cuff tear. This means the testing field is level, all subjects are under the same circumstances, so we can truly tell the effects of a posterior GH mobilization versus non-mobilization. We can really trust this data. In addition, there were 44 volunteers and 4 were excluded from the testing because they did not meet the criteria, which shows some credibility within the study. Big takeaway that I had was that we saw that incorporating posterior GH mobilization techniques into our rehab plan, the study's rehab plan, led to improved muscle activation as seen in infraspinatus muscle, quicker strength recovery of the rotator muscle. Future PTs and ATs alike can utilize this information when they are dealing with patients with this rotator cuff repair. A lot of these patients will be athletes who primarily throw, baseball, quarterbacks, and football team, etc. And we want to get athletes back to playing as soon as safely possible, so we can use the information we learned to create rehab programs to ensure we can restore the athletes, patients, back to normal in a quick manner.
So my main takeaway was that there was observed acute strength gains in the posterior muscles of the glenohumeral joint, specifically the infraspinatus. Not only that, but EMG activation of the external rotators in the patients could also show that mobilization with movement might provide some useful neuromuscular benefits and could be a good way to prime the shoulder for rehabilitation exercises within PT or AT clinics. So combined shoulder strength and neuromuscular activation from mobilization with movement could lead to a boost in performance and aid in swifter and healthier rotator cuff recovery.
My main takeaway was that glenohumeral joint stability is compromised during a rotator cuff tear, and because of this, the anterior-posterior stability therefore will depend greatly on the strength of the internal and external rotators during dynamic movements, which makes exercises that target rotation key for recovery.